Hey everybody, welcome back to Video. So Tarek and Greetings series. Is that an analog in your pocket or are you just happy to see me? Recently I've been doing a lot of videos on the different screen filters coming over to Analogue Pocket and all the different cores that feature them now. But I've been getting a lot of questions recently because of videos I published about what the RetroTink 4K would do to the Analogue Pocket. So that's what we're going to be taking a look at today. RetroTink 4K scaling to get the Analogue Pocket HDMI signal up to 4K, what the filters on the Pocket look like in the RetroTink, and what you can do with RetroTink filtration in the menu as well. Before you get far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined to want to support the channel, you got a Patreon link down below as well. But let's start off with some Game Boy Advance, and that is because it's one of the two platforms that has some built-in presets on the RetroTink side. Don't forget this is still early days, so a lot of the hardware that you can use on Pocket, all of those cores, not many of them are actually going to have profiles, but you can create your own, save them, and have fun kind of just playing around. Now if we pop into the RetroTink menu, you're going to see that we have an option for profiles, and from there, if you go load from file, you're going to see Analogue Pocket. There's going to be two options, GBA and GBC. Obviously you're on Game Boy Advance, so that is what we selected. And I did notice there's a little bit of a crop thing going on here. It's kind of bleeding off the edge, so you can adjust the crop trim if you want to make sure you're getting all of that data in there. There's more than one way to do this though. You can also play around with auto cropping within the RetroTink 4K itself. If you go back to load default, this is just going to be the default profile for anything HDMI in. From there we can play around with the Analogue Pocket filters and then use auto scale if we want to change the screen image size. It's a really nice combination of things. You'll see here we have all of the same filters we would have on Analogue Pocket if you're on the dock or if you're in handheld mode, but now they're in 4K being scaled by the RetroTink, and it is a really nice look. These scan lines and aperture mask scaled up to that 4K. You can also play around with these scanline functions within the actual RetroTink itself as well as masks. Just see what looks good to you and give it a go. It's fun to be able to put these 4K based filters on top of the footage once you scale it up. But the other nice thing is you'll see here, if we just go over to some of the other filters, there's so many options on the Pocket side, and we can go into size and go to integer plus or integer. This will shrink the screen down, and now with the RetroTink's auto crop feature, we can scale it back up to be a fit to the screen, and it's going to be a very good scale. Be aware though, when you go into the menu, some of the menu options as far as the Pocket are concerned are going to bleed slightly off the screen, but I think it's a small price to pay to have this fun. And again, I am just playing around with this. I'm not saying these are the best settings. I'm just showing you what is possible within the actual RetroTink combined with the Pocket to kind of get you a starter guide as to what you can play around with. You'll see there that screen was slightly off. That's because I used auto crop. I don't mind it whatsoever. Hit auto crop again, it'll pop right back to where it needs to be. But moving over to something like Sega Genesis core, again, this with nothing put on top of it's coming across really nicely on the RetroTink 4K. All it's doing is taking the HDMI signal out of the dock, scaling it to 4K, and then giving you your HDMI out. As far as latency and gameplay are concerned, I have no issues whatsoever. This is an absolutely spectacular way to get the Pocket to 4K. And I'm just doing this video because a lot of you have asked what it would look like, so I figured why not give you guys just a little 10-minute tour through it. If you want to see other things in the RetroTink 4K not in this video pocket-wise, leave me a comment down below and maybe I will get to those videos. But honestly, Earthworm Jim here in 4K with no filters over the top looks really nice, but of course we can play around with different filters to see how much better or worse we can make it look. You have all of the different scanline functions you can see in the background. They're going to start coming over the top of that like forest screen. We can make things look brighter, we can make things look darker, you can change the intensity, modulation, strength of those scan lines. The world is your oyster kind of when it comes to options here. You can even put some filters that definitely do not belong over the top of something like Earthworm Jim and create a completely different strange look that would never exist on any television anywhere out there. But that's the fun of this, you kind of get to pick what you want. I would say what I've created right here is definitely a vibe. I don't know that I love it and I don't know that I would recommend it, but you can kind of just experiment around with each individual core and each individual game to see what works for you. But let's take a look at King of Fighters 98 on the Neo Geo AS core. This is just stock out of the Pocket into the RetroTink 4K being scaled with absolutely no filters put on top on the RetroTink side or the Analogue Pocket side. But I'm going to switch to a source right now and you're going to see it is going to have screen filtration over the top. But I'm really curious, can you tell me if these scan lines are running over Analogue Pocket or if they're running over the RetroTink 4K? I'd be very curious to know if you can spot the difference, because there is a very subtle difference if you really pixel peep, but I am curious if you guys can tell. I would just be wondering about that. As we move back to the non-filtered screen as well, with screen filters, with scan lines, without anything over the top, this is still a great image coming out of the Pocket and going out of the Tink. That's how good these two devices are together, just to get you to 4K. And I understand this is totally an edge case scenario as far as usage is concerned. These are expensive items, and if you put them together, they just get more expensive, but you guys have been asking to see this, so I figured why not. And honestly, getting something like Puzzle Bobble in 4K is just so much fun. This is a game where I think I just like it without any filters whatsoever, and it's going to be totally subjective as to what you want to see on your screen. Game to game, you're going to want to switch the settings around to get that optimal look that you're looking for. But tell me down below, are you mostly a scanline user? Do you go with the aperture grills? Do you keep all the filtration off? I'm kind of curious what the audience does from here to there when it comes to screen filters. Now moving over to the arcade side of things on the Capcom CPS-1, again, it looks spectacular, and as far as latency is concerned, Ghouls and Ghosts is not an easy game. You need to be on your toes here, and you need to have all of your control inputs right where you need them, or else Arthur is going to die a very quick death. And honestly, even without any latency that's affecting the game, which is what we have here, perfection in the controls, Arthur's probably still going to die a bunch of times, especially if you haven't played this game recently. But the color reproduction on the core, through the Pocket, through the RetroTink, and onto your screen, I have absolutely no complaints with this whatsoever. It's bringing the Analogue Pocket to 4K. Now I know your television can scale to 4K as well, and depending on what TV you have, the latency might be absolutely outstanding. My Samsung is about 30 milliseconds, where the RetroTink is definitely beating that. So for me, sending the signal through the RetroTink and into my television at 4K is getting me less latency as far as the image scale is concerned than if I let my television do the rest of the work. But you can look up your TV model number online, find out what the latency is, and you may find out that it does better or worse. Some Sonys are in like the 60 millisecond range from people I've heard from. But again, hard game, responsive controls, looks great, but Arthur will still die. It's probably been a year since I've actually played this game for any length of time, and I almost got through the first level, which isn't bad whatsoever. But let's move over to another game on Capcom CPS-1 and just look at the color reproduction here. The vibrancy on the screen, seeing this in 4K just looks so good. And don't forget, if you're not watching this in 4K, definitely check it out in that resolution if you can. It's where a lot of the detail comes through in the image. But you're going to get the same color no matter what you're doing. I would say here, this recreation in FPGA across both the Tink and the Pocket just looks good to my eyes. But tell me down below what you think of the overall image, because I would be curious as well. But let's get into some screen filters just to kind of play around again, because that's so much of what people love on the Analogue Pocket. You'll see here that I have screen filters applied and I'm not on integer plus, which means the screen is not going to be fit to fill. But the great part is, with the new auto cropping feature on the RetroTink 4K, so long as you're at firmware 1.1, you're going to be able to go ahead and scale that image to 4K, and it's going to look great. Again, you'll lose a tiny bit of the core menu when you go into it, but it is a very small price to pay to be able to use these filters without being an integer plus and then scaling it on the RetroTink. It's a fun little party trick to be able to do that, and I think a lot of people are going to get a lot of use out of that if they combine the two items together. Now, do I think you should run out and buy a RetroTink 4K just for the Analogue Pocket? I can't answer that for you, and honestly, they're sold out right now, so you can't answer that for yourself either. You get to decide what you want to do. But Game Boy Advance was really the one core that I thought shined the best over the RetroTink 4K, especially when you're using the Game Boy Advance filters. You get this nice LCD mesh effect here over the menu and over the gameplay, and scaled to 4K, it really does look absolutely great to my eyes. It is a fun way to kind of soften the edges and make these games look more like you remember them when you played them back in the day. Because even with no filters on, it does look nice. Sometimes that sharp pixel look, you kind of want to soften it up a little bit. You want to put a filter or a mask over the top, and that's where so much of the fun just comes from here, experimenting with what looks good to you. But a fair word of warning, don't fall too deep down the rabbit hole. Don't forget, you are just doing this so you can enjoy games. Sometimes there is that tendency to really pixel peep and spend more time trying to dial in the perfect image than actually playing the game, and none of these devices, the RetroTink or the Analogue Pocket, are there just for you to fiddle. They're there to have fun with games, so make sure you definitely play some. But you'll see here, I'm going to go ahead and put over some scan lines just to kind of change it up a little bit, and it still looks great. It's a completely different feel to the image, but it is still an appealing one, and that's where there's been a lot of fun here, even just playing around with this on the Pocket, giving myself the ability to create all of these different looks for games I know, love, and remember, and decide what looks good to me. And it's been a lot of fun doing these videos on Pocket, so if there's anything I haven't covered yet that you want to see, do leave me a comment down below. But let's just play around with the filters one more time, give you one more look for Mario Kart here. We're just going to go straight to the normal mode, and you'll see it is right now overscaled. If we just hit aux1 on the RetroTink controller and go ahead and hit OK, we're now back to a perfect scale with no filtration over it whatsoever, and I did that in real time. That is how quick these things go. But you guys have been wondering about Analogue Pocket into the RetroTink 4K, and this is just kind of a little bit of a primer video to show you what is possible. There are a lot more things you can play around with on both the Pocket and the Tink, so if you're interested in a follow-up where I get a little bit deeper into the settings, do let me know down below. But this was just for fun because you guys have been asking to see how these two things work together. The screen on the Analogue Pocket is outstanding with the filters, the screen on the Analogue Pocket through the dock is outstanding, and put the RetroTink 4K together and it's even better. Short of that, I'm done. Bye bye.